Good morning. Hi, this is Mark Weaver. We're just waiting for Wade to get on here in any second, so be patient with us. Hi, Roxy. I had a little trouble signing on this morning. This technology is a little new to me, but anyway, we made it. So, Wade, let's see. Here we go.
I think I'm on. Hey,
Oh, we're on. That took a few extra minutes this morning to get this working. Good morning, Wade.
good morning, Mark. Yes, technology really was giving us a little trouble here for a second, huh?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. How did you start your morning today?
Well, I had my usual. I got up and went for a nice long walk because I just feel I need the exercise. So I walk about, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 5 miles in the morning and around the neighborhood. And I love being out when the sun's coming up in the morning. So I do two walks a day, one in the morning and then one at sunset around 6 o'clock. And, you know, we're both very fortunate that we're doing this today from our homes in Santa Barbara. And it's just an absolutely glorious day. It couldn't be more perfect.
Oh, I know. Wow.
So, what did you do this morning? How did you start off?
Well, it's been interesting. It's been a crazy week for me, and so I think a lot of people know that my other offices are on the East Coast or in the Midwest, and so things start getting moving a little earlier. So this has been one of those weeks where I've just been waking up and jumping on calls. But I had a really nice surprise this week, and a family member car broke down here in Santa Barbara, and so her parents, she was digging some stuff back from where she was going to college in San Luis Obispo, and her parents had to come and bring the title because the car was being, sort of um, junked, and so they came up and they stayed overnight last night and they left this morning. So it was really nice to see family that I haven't seen in such a long time. So it was in between phone calls. At least I had a couple shiny faces to say hello to.
Oh, that's probably the thing I miss the most about being quarantined is the interaction with people, being able to see friends, have dinner with them, hug somebody. I mean, it's just it'll be nice when we can get going again. But I think we're all looking toward the future, and it's getting closer, so that's good. So
Yeah.
last time you and I chatted, we talked about a number of things, and how this has affected our business and so forth. And I thought maybe today we'd talk about some other things. And some people wrote in and asked a couple questions, and I thought we might address those things. Somebody wrote in and said, well, how do you guys individually go about, as an interior designer and an architect, how do you go about developing a project? And how do you come up with a concept and a plan for a new project? So, we probably do it similarly, but our approach might be a little different. So, how do you do that, Wade?
It starts with inspiration, I think. And that inspiration kind of boils up out of reading a client's we do a questionnaire that's pretty extensive in our office. So we first engage a client, and depending on if it's a renovation or a new ground up construction, we ask a lot of questions about how, what their targets are for the project, how they want to live, how do they like to entertain, what do they see the house, doing for them in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, things like that. And so as you're reading through those programs, you get a chance to see their personality a little bit. But images usually sort of emerge in your head, and then I start to pursue some sort of inspiration in some way. We're lucky in a lot of ways because they have bought really signature properties, and so there's views or amenities that are exquisite and beautiful, and you want to embrace it. And typically, they're motivated to do the same. So, but it starts with the inspiration usually, and that could be a lot of things. It could be, jumping on Pinterest, books, We do a lot of that in our library. Believe it or not, on Instagram, I see tons of inspiring images that come up from other designers and architects, and fabulous renderings, and really wonderful sort of insight to this sort of creative process that similar people in our industry are dealing with. I like Mark. When we're working on a project together and we're talking about a specific space, you'll oftentimes bring up a photograph. And I always wanted to ask you, where do you find a lot of your inspiring photographs and things? Because you bring the coolest stuff to the table.
Well, that's one of the things that this quarantine has helped me with, is that I have more time now to research things, and I'm instead of just deleting all the emails that I get, I'm actually looking at a lot of them and then exploring them a little further. So we're finding actually a lot of really great resources. But like you, whether it's just now or at any normal time during a project, I'm inspired by and directed, first of all, by the architecture of the house and the location and the nature and the surroundings of the house, I think, and the architecture dictate a certain direction. And then the client always has an idea of what they're trying to achieve. But a lot of what inspires me is travel and exploring the world and this country, everything, and just seeing different lifestyles, different periods of architecture, cultures, all of that. So, and that's not something that's just now. You have that sort of under your belt, that you carry that with you throughout your career, and those are resources that we tend to pull on. So, and then, I love one of the things, and this is going to lead me into this question that I think is really a good one for you and I, but it's why the relationship between client, designer, architect, landscape architect, contractor is also important, because when you have a team of people that are working together for one common goal, you can create magic. So that the question that I had thought was kind of interesting was, we all know that there's sometimes a little bit of angst or problems between architects and designers. There's a lot of ego that gets in the way. People have different concepts, different ideas, and different directions they want to go. So as a designer coming into a project, what can the designer do to make your job easier, or just make it work a little more efficiently?
Wow. From scratch, that's kind of a feel your way through it. I've when we first met, we were sitting on a panel and we were talking about travel and how it inspires, design, and how, that inspiration, is really, and we talked sort of broadly. But as we started working together, and, we obviously had, both, sort of agree on how important that was. And as we've sort of, developed a conversation and started developing, cross marketing opportunities between us, we've gotten a chance to sort of see the nuances. The first time you took me through a project, I was so inspired because I saw this resolution of all these details that were so refined and so beautiful. And I remember looking and specifically at, the tile work in one of the bathrooms, and, it was this beautiful, intricate design, but it was perfectly resolved. And the mechanics of that tile pattern, was complicated, and to just end it abruptly would have made the whole thing look horrible. And I saw this level of refinement in moving through those details, and it just inspired me so much, because I was like, this is what we love to do. And to see someone who has put so much attention into this is going to be a joy to work with, because we are both going to be able to go from the big picture inspiration to the minute details and make sure that everything is appropriate and then well resolved. And so you know, one of the things that I love that you guys bring to the table with in knowing that is some insight into what those, you know, what some of those nuances are going to be and what triggers the client's, you know, sort of imagination. And that's been really fun because that opens up avenues of exploration into things that we may not be as familiar with. And that's like a whole, like, wow, there's another whole sort of, you know, layer of the onion being peeled away here. And so you guys do an extraordinary job of doing that. I think from our standpoint, architects have a tendency to really want to be able to sort of close the holes on anything that's left open as we're going, you know, through the documents. And part of that is that it's very disappointing for a client to get news about a project, the cost of a project, and it's really hard for a contractor to define it until it's actually, you know, put in front of them, you know, so they could actually, you know, resolve it. And so the more that we get up front on insight into how the interior, you know, design is going to be resolved and what inspires the clients and what the material finishes are, the better it is, because then instead of us being able to take stabs in the dark on what we think might go with that,
No, you
you
can
know, we
resolve
now
all
have,
that. Yeah.
yeah, we have a
Yeah, it's
track record.
why I always encourage clients to put together a team of people at the beginning, because that eliminates all the cost overruns, or, well, it attempts to, and it you know, it just makes the whole project flow easier. And I think when everybody's working together, and that's the really exciting part of the project, is working together, seeing
Yeah.
what you come up with inspires us, what we come up with inspires you, and hopefully between the two of us, the client is thrilled beyond belief and they get inspired, because it's wonderful to throw out all these ideas and then see how the client starts interacting. That's the real thrill, to see them get involved and so forth. It's great. So I
Yeah.
know from my standpoint, the thing that would I think make our job easier as a designer is to have an architect who is receptive to working with us on all these, like you were saying, all these preliminary details. And we talked about this a little bit last week, and just making sure that before we get the house designed and all the architectural details are done, that we have done our work in planning and designing and doing the layouts, so we make sure that everything fits, that there's room on either side of the bed for nightstands, that there's stacking room for draperies, or there's automatic blinds, and that's integrated into your architectural drawings, all those sorts of details. And that's what makes the project so rewarding in the end, is to see how all these things come out so beautifully. So I think it's just, you know, the nice thing is that I don't think you or I have a tremendous ego when it comes to this. If you have a better idea or solution for something, I'm thrilled. So, and you're the same way. So that's,
Well,
I think that's that shows a certain degree of professionalism, because after all, we're working for the client and we're trying to give them something exceptional.
well, and equally, you know, your respect for architecture and making sure that those sort of are in those resolving those components are equally important. Um, you know, you're a talented designer. You can make anything look beautiful. You know, I mean, you know, beautiful furnishings, beautiful lighting, beautiful materials, things like that. Um, However, if the bones aren't right that it's sitting on, if the wall is too small, if the space is too
Mm-hmm.
cramped, if the ceilings aren't the right height, if there's not a proportion engagement, those are the kinds of things that, you know, are troubling. And I can tell you that, you know, part of the problem that, you know, we may have had historically with designers is when they don't feel as if, you know, one of those legs of that stool are equally important, you know. And so I think the beauty of collaboration comes when you come to the table with mutual respect for all those sitting around it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have that, it's not good from the get-go, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not as successful as they could be. So that's
Yeah.
one of the things I love about working with you know, an insightful, you know, team member. And it can be anything. The person who's doing the home automation, or the lighting designer, or the landscape architect, right? You know, all of them, you know, are brought to the table because they all have expertise. But if there's not a willingness to want to work together, that expertise ends up becoming sometimes a tripping device. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, so.
So
Huh.
I keep getting these things on the computer as I'm working during the day. And I saw something very interesting yesterday. And they were talking about the future of how we're going to be living, certain living situations and living conditions. And um, given the event that we're going through, this horrible virus right now, it's probably not the first and the last time that this is going to happen. So they
Mm.
had, I think it was an architect in London had designed sort of a, I don't know how to describe it, like a shroud or a little tented um, closet, and that would go perhaps in your garage or in your laundry room. And when you come home at the end of the day, you walk into this little shroud or closet, and it has blue or I guess ultraviolet light, which kills germs. And then you don't have to strip down and worry about, are you bringing something into the house? And I thought, this is really brilliant, and this is going to have a tremendous effect on how you and I design spaces and houses, offices.
Mm.
So this may be something of the future. And I thought, this is really brilliant. And so I thought, this might be, in addition to having workspaces in the house, there are things that are changing. And I think there are things that are not going to go back the way that they were. So we need more efficient spaces to work in the house, more aesthetic spaces. And then perhaps things like this that we can't predict right now are going to be, we're going to have to provide for in the future in our designs. So it's hard to predict the future. It's easy to look back and say, oh, why didn't I see that? Well, hindsight's easy. But do
Mm.
you see anything changing in the way that we're going to be designing homes in the future that, say, this sort of condition requires?
Oh my God, absolutely. I think that this is probably, of course, there's horrible loss of life and agony with the people, families that have lost individuals that have been. There's great talent that us, unfortunately, we've lost in things. We can't take that back, and don't misunderstand me. What I'm about to say doesn't have anything to do with that. But the blessing is, or the silver lining is that to the rest of us that have to respond and find a way to make living environments more healthy. These are going to be extraordinarily important lessons that we learn and apply, and everything from gearing up and understanding technology. It's so funny you brought this up, because not only is it very timely, but it's a conversation that's going on in multiple industries. We're working on this hotel right now, and I was talking to an individual this week who is in that industry and said, we're being ravaged right now, and I said, yeah, I know it's horrible and difficult. And he asked me a similar question. Well, how are we going to be able to respond as an industry to all this? And I think that, there is a time for invention that's coming up that I think is going to really advance things. When we needed to communicate, computers and technology, just kind of, huge advancements were being made. But, we have mechanical systems that respond to, highly specialized spaces like, microchip production facilities or laboratories or medical facilities and things. I think that there is going to be a need for a mainstream version of mechanical systems that allow us to have purified air in our homes, that turn over very rapidly, that are, UV light, enhanced, et cetera, et cetera. And from a ground up or a total retrofit, it's going to take some ingenuity to put all these things in. It's going to cost a little bit of money, but what comes with that is peace of mind. What's a value on that?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I think we can find a way to aesthetically incorporate any of that kind of technology with inventive and creativeness. But I do feel like that technology is coming. And so the way we are going to be designing houses, our mechanical rooms, et cetera, probably going to be adjusted. What kind of plenum space we need in order to put in a certain amount of mechanical system is going to be adjusted. I think, I love the whole idea of these tanning beds coming back.
Of the what? I didn't hear you.
Like, you're talking about these UV light boosts. It's like, wow, tanning beds are coming
Right.
back. So maybe there's, a safe way to get a healthy glow and a purified,
And a
entry
suntan
into
at the
your
same
house.
time. Yeah.
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 But I do think that there's going to be things like that that are going to be enjoyable or interesting for us. And the fact that it's a little tented booth or something like that is interesting. But, think about it. It really was a technology that we already had. You just don't have to strip down, to get in there anymore. I actually really like that. It makes as sad as it is and as hard as it is and how much retooling it might take, I'm not really sure. I think we're going to have to feel our way through it a little bit, but it is exciting to be a part of an industry that's going to have to adjust, and I know
Yeah.
you feel the same way.
No, we do. We're going to have to learn how to adapt to new things. It's like I've been wondering why the aircraft industry hasn't put purification systems or filtering systems in their air conditioning. That you get on a plane and, it's like rolling the dice. If somebody's sick on the plane, everybody's going to get sick. They should have done this decades ago. But we're going to have to implement these kind of procedures, I think, into homes. And I think we're just going to have to learn. This is a learning process. It's like you look back years and years ago, there wasn't earthquake preparedness like there is today. People build structures. I mean, when you're designing a house, you have to take and consider earthquakes. You have to take and consider tornadoes and all these sort of natural disasters that happen in whatever part of the country you're building. And
Yeah.
likewise, we have to accommodate those things with when we're doing the interiors too. So I think it's going to be a learning process, but it is exciting, and discovery is always exciting, I think.
I think that, well, and it's fun when you get to do it. And like, if we go back to our previous conversation about collaboration, it's like, well, Mark, we have this booth that's this big. We want to accommodate this, a sanitary booth, et cetera, and you're going to, come back and say, well, what are the fabric options?
Right, yeah. Or you're going to
What
want
are
to put it in the
what are
middle
the
of the
finish
living room.
options?
Yeah. Um, you made a comment the other day about the thing that being at home has caused you to realize that certain things aren't adequate. Like if people are spending more time at home, you said you need a second refrigerator. And,
Yeah,
I found the same thing because people are not able to go out, so they buy in bulk or larger quantities. I mean, especially if you have a family, you
yeah.
have to stock up on food, and you don't want to be out as often, or you can't be out as often. So those are the kind of things I think are going to change.
Yeah, in my personal living environment, that was the first thing. I think the second thing is that, a little bit more storage, for some backup supplies when you can't get supplies, every time you leave the house to go run. And, my brother is interesting. He's set, his family's very, very, particularly sensitive, and they have some pre-existing conditions in their family. So, they've gone to, buying everything on, Amazon or Target or whatever. And Brian actually set up one of his car bays in the garage with a giant table, so that he could take everything out of these packages, Lysol it all down, right? And then dispose of all of the packaging in a way that was safe. And then he puts it on a shelf, and, if it can stay out, he leaves it out there, but won't bring it in right away because he wants to make sure that if there is any lingering virus, it would be killed off before they actually utilize it. But can you imagine having a big staging area like that when you don't have anything like that?
No.
Is pretty remarkable. And I think that there's going to be requests like that are going to come up, for guests, etc. We may end up having closets where we have, UV light in those closets. So whatever we may have drug home with our coats, ends up getting killed before we put it back on again the next day.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And the custom of taking off your shoes before entering the house is now suddenly much more appealing rather than just an inconvenience.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I think that it's interesting because, after all of that prep and, detoxing and everything like that, then you also just have to get on to living. And, living, and being creative at home also requires some peace of mind. And I can tell you that personally, this last couple months, I've had a weekly call with my counselor, just to download some of the anxiety and some of the things that are sort of stirring you inside. People come to us to be problem solvers, and there also becomes a burden that you carry around every day. And one of those is emotionally anxiety. Like, how are we dealing with some of the added stress here? Because we need to still perform and still preserve our creative energy. So the inspiring images that we find to start a project and all these kinds of things, sometimes they're only going to take hold if we are at peace inside emotionally. At least for me, I've known that. And so having some space in a house now that's contemplative, that allows me to be able to step aside from some of the stress, is also something that I'm trying to do. And nature, bringing more nature in. I mean, you're inspired. I mean, look at what, your backdrop is unbelievable, by the way, Mark. And that kind of, looking through nature like that. And I've noticed that every week, and it's harder to find, but I'm bringing in tons of flowers into the house because of the
Yes.
fragrance and the beauty and the color and the delicacy. And it's just something that makes me happy. I went to Vaughn's the other day, and they had like 3 selections of flowers, and they hadn't been replaced in a week. And I was like, oh my God, this is slim pickings.
I know. Well, I mean, we're very fortunate to be surrounded by such incredible beauty here. And I went to Gelson's the other day, and I bought a little thing of potted roses and stuck it on the table in its foil thing, because I don't have the right vase for it. But I mean, nature is so grounding, it's so centering, and it makes you realize that, sort of takes you out of the world sometimes we get wrapped up or lost in, and realize it's what's important, seeing the beauty around you, enjoying things. And I think this time has brought people back together, thank God. We were all headed, I think, in the wrong direction. And the thing that this has done is it's brought people together. It's united people under a common cause. It's made people appreciate one another and the very simple things in life that we take for granted. I go out walking. I love to do these walks. And everybody that I go by waves, they say hello. Everybody that goes by in a car, they wave. I've noticed how much more polite people are, and it's just wonderful to see that change. So like you said, there's always something good that comes out of it.
There is, and I'm glad you said that, Mark. You started out your day today by taking a long walk and watching the sunrise, and I'm just going to share with everybody that the other day you told me about a walk that you had taken, on the Mesa, which is an area here in Santa Barbara. And you had walked down to the harbor, and just as you got there, the sun was, clearing the mountains, and there was that first ray of sunshine coming across the water of the Pacific into Santa Barbara, which is, if anybody wants to feel inspired, I'll tell you, just take a walk along the waterfront in Santa Barbara. It's pretty remarkable. But when you were going through those, those sort of descriptions about all of those things, that's what a way to start a day. I mean, versus me jumping on a phone call or a conference call.
Yeah.
It just, but I'm going to learn a few lessons from you, Mark. But if you take 2 walks a day, is that what you're doing tonight to sort of end your day? And
Yeah, it's I love walking at sunset. So I leave around 6:30 and I go for a 4 or 5 mile walk and along the ridge of the mountain and look down over the Pacific. And parts of it I can see just landscape, and parts of it look out to the ocean. It's just a killer. So what are you going to do to end your day? I mean, everybody's the big events of the day seem to be our meals. The
oh my
surprising
God,
thing is that I've been cooking for the last 4 weeks, and so far, I haven't killed myself or Fred, so we're still alive.
Well, actually, you know what? So yes, I would have to say the 19 of COVID-19 is actually, I think, the weight you gain, being at home and nesting and not being able to go to the gym. I see all these people putting on videos that are so creative and getting in their fitness and everything else. But what we've been doing is taking Chanel for a walk. And the thing that I didn't really expect, that was the biggest surprise, is as we've been doing that, we've been passing and seeing a lot of neighbors. And California's always had this reputation that you never know your neighbor in California. I don't even know what they do, et cetera, et cetera. So not true. In this whole thing, the kindness of people, the fact that we're all in this together, there is this sort of like, there's this wonderful sort of like mini excitement that you see in people's eyes that are seeing live people walking around. And even though you may be 10 feet across the road, there's been all these invitations. When this is over, we're going to have you over for drinks, we're going to have you over for cocktails. And I think that is so cool because it's contrary to what the reputation is. And actually it made me feel like this is a wonderful sort of place to call home, regardless of what my sort of historic roots are. And I'm inspired by that. Beyond the nature, the beauty, but the tendency to want to go and pick everybody's citrus right now. I mean, there are these trees that are loaded with citrus. And every time we walk by, I said, I'm getting a picker. This is ridiculous.
So somebody that's watching us today said, dang, Wade, I thought you lived in Milwaukee. So
Yeah.
for your friends that are watching you from Milwaukee, you better make sure that they think you haven't totally jumped ship and moved to California.
No, but I've been sitting this COVID virus time out here, and I do have a home in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has been my home, and it's still my legal my legal state of residence. But when all the quarantine started, and happened to be here when it happened, um, and uh, and that was actually kind of a nice thing because usually I'm only here for a week or two, and you don't really get a chance to settle in, with your roots as much. You're kind of running from place to place, and I have a lot of business in LA, and so even though I might be here, my days are full with a lot of other things. This has been great because we've been able to sort of camp out a little bit longer here and actually get a chance to, grow a little bit of a root here, which has been nice, and get a chance to know our neighbors, the landscape. I'm even starting to get to know some of the flowers and the trees. I haven't been here during this period typically because usually when the May gray rolls in, I was off to Nashville or Wisconsin. But this year, we've been blessed with this blue sky weather. But I've also had a chance to kind of see, some of the springtime, sort of,
Great. So I think it's time maybe we should wrap this up. And I hope you have the great rest of your day is great. I know that we have a call which a little bit later that I'm looking forward to. And I'm also looking forward to discussing with you my project. So I'm very fortunate that Wade's helping me on my home in Santa Barbara. So I had a couple ideas over the night and I wanted to bounce them off you today. So when we hang up, I'll talk to you about that.
I look forward to it, Mark. Every time we get to
Anyway,
do something creative, it's great.
thank you so much, Wade. It was great chatting with you. And thanks everybody for watching this.
Well, thank you for having me on Mark Weaver Live. I love it.
Okay.
All
All
right,
right.
talk soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye, everybody.